So hello everyone and welcome back again to Junkyard Summit. Today I'm going to do a triple overview of these following cases. So what I have here is the Tecware Alpha 2019 tempered glass. I also have the Rakk HaliyaM, the micro ATX form factor one. And at the same time, what I have here is the Silverstone PS15. So what's common between these three cases? These three are budget-oriented cases, having a price value under 2,500 Philippine peso. And the second one is that these three are airflow-focused cases. So, as we can see that the front panel for this one are all mesh type. So there's a perforation for all of these. Again, we could see that a lot of the trends lately are going for these types of front panels. And with that, let us go first with the biggest case among these three. So the first case for today is the Tecware Alpha TG 2019. So this is a refresh of their famous Alpha series. And again, this case has two variants, the mid-tower one and the micro ATX one. So what I have here is the full. As we can see, this costs around 2,400 Philippine peso and is available in most retail stores, computer retail stores out there. As for its dimension, this case measures 447 by 220 by 510 millimeter, and that is on a length width height basis. And again, like I said a while ago, this case features a front mesh panel and at the same time has a tempered side glass panel that has 4 screws to secure it. Front I/O for this case has the power button, LED indicators, as well as 2 USB 3 and 2 USB 2.0, as well as an HD audio, which is situated at the top of the case. And at the same time, this case has a magnetic dust filter for the exhaust or intake for your top. Going inside the case, again, this case supports ATX, micro ATX, and as well as ITX motherboards. And at the same time, this has a max GPU support of 380 millimeters in length. And as for max CPU cooler support, it supports a 165mm. PSU support has a max length of 225 millimeters. And as for the fan support for this case, this supports 3 120mm or 2 140mm in the front, 2 120mm or 2 140mm on the top, and lastly a 120mm support at the back. As for radiator support, it supports a 120mm, 240 or even a 280mm radiator in the front and one 120mm at the back. And I also forgot that this case has 3 120mm fan included on it, and at the same time rubber grommets to have a cleaner cable management in the front. Another thing that I really like about this case upon first inspection is the inclusion of reusable PCIe covers. A lot of these budget cases doesn't include one. Most of the time, it's just a single removal of the PCIe covers. So kudos to Tecware for adding this kind of small stuff. And last thing that I should mention here is this case supports 2 3.5-inch hard drive and at the same time 4 2.5-inch SSD drives, where the 2 is mounted at the back of the case. And speaking of the back side of the case, this has enough cable space where you can comfortably route all of your cables. Also, the 3.5-inch cage for this case is movable, so there's 2 positions, or you could entirely remove it for, I think, a 360mm rad support if ever. But I need to check more on that once I do my detailed review for this case. And I think that's it for the Tecware Alpha. Let's go to the next case. So for our next case and our first micro ATX case for today, what I have here is the Rakk HaliyaM. So this is a micro ATX chassis, and like the Tecware, this also has a full mid-tower ATX case. Currently, this costs around 2,000 Philippine peso for the black and 2,100 Philippine peso for the white version of this one. For the dimension of this case, this has a measurement of 400 by 208 by 418 millimeter. And again, this case has a perforated mesh front style panel. And as compared to the other case that I have here today, this one has the largest holes for its ventilation, which I think works on a double-edged basis, as this can provide more airflow, but at the same time it could accumulate more dust if you're using it as a front intake. As for the front panel, this has the power button, 2 USB 2 and 1 USB 3.0, as well as HD audio ports. This case also has an LED button, but I think this doesn't have any use as of now, and I think it's just a button with no wires attached to it. The HaliyaM also has magnetic dust filters on top of it, so which is again a good plus, especially for these budget cases. So before I discuss more about the interior of this case, just a quick run through on Rakk Haliya's new implementation for its side panel tempered glass mechanism. So instead of using thumb screws like we can see in a lot of tempered glass cases, Rakk now uses for the HaliyaM a hinge type mechanism in securing their tempered glass, which I think is cool and great at the same time, as it could give the side panel a more cleaner and smoother look. So going back to the specification of this case, this again supports micro ATX and mini ITX motherboards, and at the same time has a max GPU length of 360mm and a max cooler support for 160mm. So a Noctua NHD15 will not fit in this case now, but a CryoRig H5 would definitely fit in this case. PSU lens support is 180mm, which I think is more than enough for most PSUs out there. As for fan support, this has 3 120mm or 2 140mm in the front, and 2 120mm or 2 140mm on the top. And lastly, a single 120mm fan support at the back. This case also has one included 120mm fan on it. For its radiator support, it can support 120mm, 240mm, and a 280mm in the front, and a single 120mm at the back. As for storage support, like the Tecware Alpha, this can hold up to 2 3.5-inch hard drive, and at the same time 4 2.5-inch SSD drive, where 2 of those can be mounted in the front section of the case. As for my other notes, this case doesn't have reusable PCIe covers, which is sad, I think. And at the same time, this also has rubber grommets for a cleaner routing for your cables. Speaking of cables, the cable management for this case, I think it's going to be easy, as there's enough space for all of your routings. And at the same time, Rakk included Velcro straps for a cleaner look for your back panel. And with that, let us go to our last case for today. So going now to our smallest case for today, what I have here is the Silverstone PS15. This case only measures 351 by 192 by 381mm. And again, like the other two cases, this has a mesh front panel for a more airflow-centric approach. And personally, I think this is the best looking case among the three, as I really like the minimalistic look for this case. Price for this one is 2,500 Philippine peso, making it the most expensive case among the three. Again, this case has a tempered glass side panel, and as for its front I/O panel, it has a power button, 2 USB 3.0, a HD audio jack, and at the same time an LED indicator. This case also has a magnetic dust filter like the other two, again, which is a nice touch for these budget cases. Going inside the case, this supports micro ATX and mini ITX motherboards, and at the same time the GPU length for This one is 314 millimeters, so that is fairly shorter as compared to the other two cases, and a max CPU cooler of 154 millimeters. So further research is needed if you are planning to use this case. PSU support, on the other hand, is just limited to 150 millimeters. Again, this should not be a problem if you are using around 800 watt PSU and below, as most of those PSUs has a length of 150 millimeter. And if you have noticed it, as compared to my other two cases, this doesn't have a PSU shroud, which I think is a big letdown, as this is a more expensive one as compared to the other two. So going to our fan support, this case can support two 120 millimeters both in top and in the front, and a single 140 millimeters on the top. The side says that it can support two 140 millimeters in the front, but I already did a quick research about this case, and it seems that you cannot use two 140 millimeters in the front, as it would have a clearance issues with the front I/O cables of the case. And lastly, a single 120 millimeter support at the back. Silverstone also added a single 120 millimeter fan on it, which is again a nice touch. Radiator support, on the other hand, is limited to 120 millimeter or 240 millimeters in the front, and a single 120 millimeters in the back. And like the other two, this case can support a top mounting radiator. Storage support for this case is fairly limited, as you can see with the size of it. It can only support one 3.5 inch hard drive, and at the same time two 2.5 inch SSD drive, where two of those can be mounted at the back of the motherboard panel. So other notes for this case, first is it only has one reusable PCIe cover, so the remaining three is just a one-time removable one. The other thing is it doesn't have any rubber grommets for its cable hiding, and at the same time cable management at the back is really restricted, as there is a really small clearance between the motherboard panel and the other side of the side panel. And as I said that this doesn't have a PSU shroud, expect that most of your PSU cables will be in plain sight, and I think that will contribute to a more messier insides. And I think that is all for today. So if you like the video, go hit that like button, and at the same time do subscribe to my channel. And also comment down below on what are your thoughts on this case, and at the same time, which do you think is the best looking one and the most feature rich one. Once again, this is Brain of Junkyard Summit. Thank you, and see you in the next one.